days of hiring the person who's got the most extroverted personality, tell the best jokes, and compromise a little bit on the substance and the work ethic are gone. I want somebody who understands what it takes to be successful and will commit to doing that every single day.
Welcome to Conversations Around the Corner, where we talk to construction executives about who they are and how they got there, inspiring the next generation of construction leaders. My name is Eric.
And I'm Matt Field. Our guest today is Keith Carlson, Regional Sales Manager for the Holland Company, a distributor of plastics resins. Keith is a talented salesman, experienced manager, Corvette enthusiast, and all-round plastics industry legend. In our conversation today, we talk about his upbringing, Tiger Woods' return to golf, Corvettes, and the pitfalls of building a custom home. Hope you enjoyed the show.
When I was real young, my father, who worked for a series of Illinois toolwork companies in the accounting department, was transferred down to a division in Kentucky. So I lived in a little town called Russellville, Kentucky for about 5 years as a kid. Listened to nothing but country music for those 5 years. Didn't know there were any other kinds of music that existed till we came back up when I was in second grade, and then lived in Itasca ever since. My dad transferred to a division called Hycone that makes the six-pack carriers. He worked for a company called Shake Proof that makes plastic cups. He worked for a company called Buildex. All divisions of ITW. So the smell of melting polymer was in the air at a very early age.
That's where you got your love for plastic?
No, I don't think I developed a love for plastic until I reached this stretch goal of making $30,000 a year. And then I decided that maybe this wasn't so bad. Actually, I went to school and studied marketing and finance. I had the dream of being a stockbroker, investment banker, something like that. But I got out of school and was studying for the Series 7. I had no money at all. And after I graduated from college, my dad, and I went to Europe and backpacked around for 2 months. Literally spent my last dime in the airport in London on the way back. And when I got home completely broke, my dad welcomed me home and he said, now that you're home, and your rent starts today at $250 a month. It goes up $50 a month, and we'll cap it at $500. So this is back in 1989. So $500 was a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. So it's like, you better go out and find some work, son. I threw the one a ad for a plastic strap for a company, Plastics in Elk Grove. They did injection molding and extrusion, and I told them that was to be. It really wasn't, but I needed the money, and they hired me on at $23,000 a year, and I started working there in 1989, and they were kind enough to invest in technical training, kind of immerse myself on the technical side of the business with learning about tooling, about part design, learning about processing and things like that. Series 7, I interviewed for jobs with Lehman Brothers, and sure enough, I got an offer to $17,000 a year and basically sitting in a boiler room calling Mr. Field. You'd had a minute to talk about some exciting new investment opportunities. Wait for the click. So at that point, I was all the way up to like 26 grand. So I'm like, I can't go backwards.
Yeah.
I wanted to get out of my parents' house too. So I stuck with it from there.
So where'd you go to college?
I went to Northern Illinois University in DeKalb.
And you said you did marketing there?
Right. Marketing and college selection process. It's hard thing at this point. Life has turned out very lucky in a lot of ways, but my dad went to Elmhurst College, just a local university. And in growing up, they always said, you're going to go to college. When I was in high school, a baseball scholarship, our varsity each promised myself and two other guys that he was going to get us hooked up to get scholarships. And then he got sick We didn't have a full ride scholarship sitting at the door senior year. So my parents handed me one of those catalogs. It's like 5 inches thick with all the colleges and the university, and said, go ahead and pick one. So I applied to University of Illinois in Northern Illinois. I went and visited University of Illinois with my mother. We walked the campus. It was great. And then a while later, I went to Illinois and stayed overnight with one of the guys I played baseball with in high school. And he took me to this party that had all these good-looking girls. Fun. I'm like, this is where I'm going. So that was the college selection process based on a really good.
Yeah.
And
there's a scene in He Got Game about that. I've seen that. Well, they're courting, Jesus Shuttlesworth to school, and a big part of it is about the girls.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, it's a cornucopia that didn't exist. It turned out to be a great choice. It's got a great business program, and I had the opportunity to connect with some folks, some guys, and we started a fraternity. My freshman year, we had 125 guys in this Delta Sigma Phi chapter. We had won the homecoming competition 3 years in a row, which was previously won by another fraternity 9 years in a row. We had a $300,000 house on Greek Row. I served a variety of roles from recruiting to management type of roles. And as much as the classroom and academics taught me a lot about business, the real world experience of recruiting and sales, operating a budget that the fraternity had, going out and purchasing a house and furnishing it, and then living by a budget to pay the rent. Everything from driving parties to driving, activities around homecoming competition. It really lent a lot what I think was an education that I came out of Northern with. So
yeah, so you had a business mindset from a pretty early age.
It's interesting. I grew up in a very middle class environment toward the area and maybe where they're inspired. And I got actually good grades. So I got straight A's my junior and senior year with honors classes and such. And who was in business. And he personally did very well for himself and had a nice house and had a nice life. And he was really good at talking to a variety of people and acting with them. And I admired him. I didn't know any attorneys. I didn't know admissions. And those roles seemed... So, I think that what I try to do today for my kids is try to introduce them to a variety of people that have these roles in life, these professions, and let them see that it's something that you can do as well. This person is not all that more privileged than you, and they're not much smarter than you. They just work to that end, and you can do the same. So, yeah, I had a business mindset because that's what I was surrounded with. My dad was in accounting, but he was working for a business. My uncle, as I mentioned, was more on the sales side, and he had some success in business.
Do you now, when you look back and you say you encourage your children about, other professions, do you ever look back and say, oh, maybe I would have done well at some more like professional career, like physician or lawyer or accountant? Or do you kind of like the free wheeling and dealing that the business sales world provides?
I'm really happy. I feel very lucky and privileged to have gained the experiences that I've had over the last, since 1989. How many years is that? Oh my gosh. It's a lot of years. I've had the opportunity to be the dumbest guy in the room a lot of times, meaning surround myself with really smart people. And I've tried to pay attention and learn some things along the way. I've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit. I thought I was going to be going to Europe, but turns out the world economy kind of changed in the 90s and 2000, and that the economic center or the economic opportunity gravitated toward Far East. So I've done a lot of traveling in the Far East, done a lot of traveling around Mexico, and of course the U.S. We've been able to grow a couple of businesses, both the extrusion business that was part of my life for 10 years with Fourth Plastic, and the company I'm with now, Holland Company. started with this company in 99. We were a little over 300 million in sales, and this last fiscal year we did just under 1.5 billion.
Wow.
So it's been really an amazing ride. So looking back and wishing I had, tried something else, no way. This has been amazing.
Yeah, going back to your experience at the fraternity and business experiences that you learned, but how much of it just in business do you think it's helped out that you're a likable person, or like that you know how to connect with people and make them laugh and all that?
One of the first business books that I read kind of coming out of college, I think it was published in 89 or 90, was the Leadership is an Art by Max Dupree. He was the guy with Herman Miller. Mm-hmm. And that book talks a lot about the importance of relationships and communication, how leadership is not as much a science as it is an art. I think that fraternal experience early put me in a situation where I had to interact and connect with pretty diverse group of people. And I think the reason the fraternity was so successful is that we did recruit pretty strong, diverse community of men into it. I can't say that I've been proficient at it from the start. I think I made a lot of mistakes along the way and probably said some wrong things at the wrong time, and that's a part of it, right? So I think it was absolutely a good jumping off point to learn how to connect with a variety of people. I don't think I had a whole lot of self-confidence coming out of high school in anything other than athletics. Wasn't a real extroverted guy, but I think that experience in the fraternity helped develop a little confidence. It helped develop a little finesse in communication. That I believe, is emphasized in that book, and stumbled along the way with my first jobs. I remember we had a plant manager. Really, he was a extrusion supervisor who was a very gruff guy. His name is Jimmy. We'll just leave it at that. He was a ball buster. And when he was trying to, go into production with a part, and particularly a new tool, and you're tuning it in, trying to get dimensions, at least the critical dimensions within tolerance, and then you bring it to the customer to have them sign off on the part. There'd be times when there'd be 10 critical dimensions and you'd have 6 of them. But the part would appear to function, so he'd send me off to go get it approved. And when the customer didn't approve it, I'd come back and tell him, the customer didn't like it. We need to change that. He would just lay into me. And, what good are you? If you can't go and get him to sign off on this, you're a piece of dirt. You got to do a better job. So finally, I realized that the communication aspect of it needed to evolve. So let's tee up the same scenario. I'd go to the customer. There'd be 6 dimensions that were in, 4 that were out. Customer would say, "This is terrible. You got to fix this. You got to fix this. And I don't want to see you again until it's fixed." I'd go back to Jimmy and say, "Okay, Jimmy, customer liked it. But if you could just adjust these couple things, it'll be perfect." And he'll sell 1 million of them. And he's really grateful for the effort that you and your team are putting through.
Yeah.
Much different reaction from Jimmy with that second set of communications. And he viewed me in a much more positive manner. So, yeah, there's no doubt that many times not what you say, but how you say it that sticks with people and has the real impact.
Well, that's like that same thing where they say, like, if you're giving somebody a review or something, you say 3 positive things and then 1 negative thing. It totally shifts the whole conversation to being barriers are down. They're more open to hearing the criticism because they're like thinking, "Oh, I'm doing a great job and this person is being reasonable and likes me." And then they actually hear, the piece of advice.
There's, I call it the PNP sandwich, right? So you start with a positive, and then a negative, and then positive, right? Exactly. You're doing a wonderful job in this area. Really appreciate your efforts. This other area here, if we can see some improvement, it's going to impact the company in this way. It's going to impact you in this way. And I see great things coming from you once we get past these other issues. So you're right. People can just get defensive and not understand that the critique in the long run is what's going to is what's going to help them be more successful. But it's got to be delivered in the right way.
The other wild thing about your example there about like going back to the production manager and giving him like, this is what the customer said. We're all on the same team here. We want to sell this product. And if the customer is telling us this is no good, what good does it do to turn around and yell at each other internally? I'd never get that mindset. Clearly, we're all on the same team here. Like, I don't get it.
One of the things that I learned and I try to apply is before going into a conversation, you should calibrate yourself to that person's perspective, because that's going to be what matters to them. Customer doesn't want to hear about how hard it is to get those last couple of dimensions, and the fact that you've already worked on it for 8 hours and are probably not going to make the money that you thought because the startup has been so long. They don't care about that. All they care is fit, form, and function, and how quickly are they going to be able to get into production with their assembly based upon your component coming in. And that supervisor, all he cares about is productivity and moving on to the next thing. I shouldn't say that's all he cares about, but in that example. So, yeah, you've got to realign your conversation around the perspective of the audience.
So tell us about the first job at Custom. Did you have any people that gave you a good performance review or influenced your work life or your trajectory?
There was an engineering manager there that was very fatherly. His name was Bob Mack. And I knew nothing going into that business. All I knew was business theory coming out of college and had the fraternity experience. But from a plastics and technology standpoint, I knew absolutely nothing. So he really took the time to explain things multiple times to me until they finally stuck, so that eventually I could represent myself at the customer level as a somewhat expert in our craft in plastics. That's how they're certainly relying on you to be that person. And I wouldn't have got there without Bob. You need guys like that. You need people who enjoy the mentoring process and are patient. When you've said the third really dumb thing in a row, just review it again with you. I spent a lot of time investing in that portion of the career as well. There was probably 10 Saturdays in a row that I dragged myself out of bed at 7 o'clock and be in the office at 8 o'clock to just spend a few hours over the weekend learning.
When you were 22 years old?
I was.
You didn't stay out till 2 in the morning or anything?
I did.
But then you still got up at 8 a.m.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Absolutely. That's why I had to go 10 Saturdays in a row. It's I probably could have done it in 3 Saturdays had I not been up at 2.
You're at half speed, though.
Yeah. So, yeah, Bob was great. I would say that at that stage of my career, there wasn't a whole lot of training on the sales side. I did have a boss that took me out on probably 5 to 10 sales calls before he asked me to go it alone. I learned early that probably the most efficient way to get good at sales was to listen to what other people say and just copy it, and so just take note of phrasing or statements or approaches that sound good, and then parrot it back when I was on my own. So I like to say now that every good thing I ever say I've stole from somebody else. I think that's what a lot of people do early in their sales career. They pay attention to what's working for others and just try to emulate it.
Do you have any very specific go-tos that when you're starting into a meeting and you can kind of tell the buyer or whoever engineer is a little bit cold? Do you have any very specific phrases or techniques you go back to try to open doors and get them to bring their barrier down?
It's a good question. I think that it starts in the preparation. And I think that the way to overcome nervousness or uncertainty is to prepare. Before the sales call, understanding what it is that the customer may be interested, understanding customers' business or the industry that they're in, and having something pertinent to discuss about each of those is good preparation. But the go-to is just asking good questions. And I think that's the key really for any successful person in sales is asking the best questions.
Yeah.
And then shutting up and listening.
Here's another question. And I'll take no offense to it, the answer either way. But do you put the customer's specific personal notes in your system and review them before you go into a call? For example, do you have oh, Matt likes running, golf, and his wife's pregnant? Do you then go and review that and then make sure you hit it right away?
You'd be a fool if you didn't.
Exactly, right? Because it totally makes a connection.
Well, a lot of times it's names. It's trying to recall what their spouse's name is, what their kids' names are. Everybody likes to hear their child's name. Putting that down on paper and it's not disingenuous. It's just being organized.
Yeah. Does your system actually literally have a field for spouse's name, children's names? Or does it just you put it in a note section?
You just put it in a note section.
Because that would be another level of planning, is to actually build out the database to be okay, here are their names. Here are their ages.
Well, not trying to give away all my sales secrets, but I think you guys have been doing it long enough where you'd agree. I mean, people do business with people who they trust and people who they like. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that you can't ignore the value proposition. Bottom line is you have to help customers grow their business. It's not about selling anything. It's about helping other people succeed and leveraging your toolbox as a plastic extruder or as a plastic resin seller to help them be successful. But along the way, if you don't have that chemistry and if they don't trust you, you're not going to get very far.
There's this section that we're going to ask you, Keith, a couple different things, and then where it's called overrated, underrated. You tell us whether you think it's overrated or underrated, and then, maybe why.
That's awesome.
So,
okay. All
right, the C3 generation of Corvettes, overrated, underrated.
You know what? That's a really good question because I'm into Corvettes, right?
Exactly.
And my favorite is the C2 generation. So the C3 generation, which is the Mako Shark generation, I think was extremely innovative on the day. I can look back at it and completely appreciate the design of it. But when you look at the overall performance of those cars, mechanically, they underperformed. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say overrated on the performance standpoint, but maybe underrated in terms of design.
Design, okay. Overrated, underrated, button-up Hawaiian shirts and Sansa slacks.
Underrated. Those things come in handy.
All the time, right?
Especially those Sansa slacks, man. You need to have that stretch in the waistband, particularly as you get older.
And particularly when you're trying to relate to plastics executives or plastics buyers, right?
You got to know your audience, and those guys are a lot closer to Sansa slacks than they are to skinny jeans. So.
That's right. Except for Itasca Plastics.
Right.
Okay, overrated, underrated penny loafers.
They say that you can detect somebody's success in life by their shoes. Penny loafers are the shoes that I wore in the 80s. And I think I've moved beyond penny loafers. So I'm going to say that they are overrated.
I will say they give a level of comfort in a sales meeting. If somebody's wearing penny loafers, man, this dude is confident, he's comfortable in himself.
Now, what if he has the penny actually in the penny loafer?
That's a step too far, I think. I think you could do without the penny. Penny loafer without the penny. I think that's a sweet spot.
They used to do that though, right?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, overrated, underrated, building your own custom home of your dreams.
Oh my God. So it is overrated. So we built a house. It took probably a total effort of about 3.5 to 4 years when it started with design, speccing out room sizes, measuring your furniture, making sure everything goes in there, understanding not only how you live today, but how you plan to live 10 years from now, how many kids you are going to have. Do you need to have space for in-laws? Do you need to have space if your parents get older? It's a lot of work.
A lot of tiring conversations there. Even having that conversation sounds exhausting.
Oh, I tell you, and just like we talked about before in terms of preparation, if you do it right on the front end in terms of working with a architect and a interior designer to specify the space, you can limit your exposure to risk once you start building. But that's the very difficult part, is that in the conversations I've had with people who have built their own home, it's the gray areas that get them into a bind. Meaning, if they didn't specify it on the print or in writing with the builder up front, and you get to the point where you have a decision to make, you're going to be in trouble. It's like a second full-time job for the period that it's actually being constructed in terms of follow-up and walking the site and all that. And in the end, the home that we built, it's a nice house. It's pretty large scale. It won the Crystal Key Award in 2014
All right.
for the best new home of that size. Our kids move in, and they have these beautiful, bedrooms with their own bathrooms and stuff like that. They're all sleeping in one room, and they're telling us they wish we could go back to the other to the other house.
That could not have felt good.
No, and the thing is what you realize is the house is just a place to create memories, and bricks and sticks that are around you have very little to do with your overall impression of that space. It's who you're with and what you're doing and how you're feeling. That is the ultimate value of a home. How big it is, how tall it is, how nice it is on the inside is great, but not as good as actually living in it and having that great family experience in it. So,
All right, well said.
Yeah, that's good. All right, how about this one? Overrated, underrated. Tiger Woods returned to golf this year.
I think it's underrated. I can't say that I'm necessarily a huge fan of Tiger Woods, but there's no doubt that he changed the sport. And there's no doubt that he inspires a lot of people, a lot of kids. He's connected with a population, particularly when he first came on, that increased the popularity of the sport amongst the younger crew by leaps and bounds. I mean, when I was a kid, I actually caddied for a couple of years and caddied over at the Medina Country Club and had the opportunity to play on Tuesdays, but golf wasn't cool back then. So didn't take advantage of what would have been a great opportunity to play. But now I see a lot of grammar school kids that go to school with my kids that play golf. And I think it's great. So a lot of that is attributed to what Tiger did. So guys like Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, who not only had long careers but had this amazing persona out there, I think are good for the game. So I'd love to see Tiger come back, but quite frankly, I think it's unlikely he's going to have the same success that he had 10 years ago. The players nowadays are just incredible.
And just for the listener's perspective, we are recording this on January 27th, and Tiger played his first round at the Farmers Insurance Open yesterday. Did you happen to catch any of the highlights from his round yesterday?
I did not. How did he fare?
Not well.
He finished four over.
4 over. And off the tee, it was, you go back and watch it. There's a YouTube video of they do every single one of his shots. Every single tee shot, he's hitting his second shot from this like thick rough, and he just looked on tilt and uncomfortable, and it started out a bit dicey. He kind of pulled it together by the end. I think on the third hole, his second shot on the third hole was the first fairway he hit, and then he totally skied it. Pushed it off to the right, and then took the iron and slammed it down in the fairway. So that was happening on the third hole yesterday.
He was playing with Jason Day and Dustin Johnson.
Oh my gosh, and those guys were just embarrassing him.
Well, somebody thought, some marketing guy thought, okay, this is great. We're going to put like Jason Day, Dustin Johnson, and Tiger Woods together, and everyone's going to love this. And that is probably the cruelest thing you could have done to Tiger Woods when he's like fragile, trying to come back, and he's playing with those two guys.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to watch that tournament now.
Yeah, right.
Well, and he will be paired with them on Friday as well, right? They keep the same pairings on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
Today might be the last day though, because he might not make the cut. So
that's going to be must-see TV today.
Yeah. If you had to hire one of the two people to sell plastic for you, who would it be? Patrick Kane or Jonathan Toews? In other words, do you go for the flashy?
Right. No, I know them both well. I went to the game on Sunday night and made the mistake of making a critical comment within the group I was with about Jonathan Toews' contribution so far this season. and he ended up getting 1 goal and 3 assists on the night. The guy just does the right thing on a consistent basis. And he seems to have a work ethic that is very consistent, and he's committed to the work that he needs to do to be successful. And I'm not saying Kane doesn't. Kane's skill set out there, his stick handling, his shooting is remarkable, but I think I got to go with Captain Serious.
So as a manager of plastic salesmen, do you look for people who can pull something out that you never saw coming and do something miraculous and land a big account, or do you hire somebody who is day in, day out doing the right thing the right time?
It's what I look for in people who I hire. Number one, I look for a cultural fit. I look for people who believe what I believe. I look for people who want to help customers be successful. Nobody wants to be sold, but everybody wants competent people to help them be successful. So I look for a cultural fit, people who believe what I believe. Then I look for a variety of things. I look for smart people who have a technical aptitude. I look for people who have demonstrated hard work and a commitment to a training program. I look for people who are competitive. A lot of this ends up attracting people who have participated in sports along the way because of some of these, characteristics as it relates to work ethic, competitive. And then I look for people who are humble and can see the other person's perspective, somebody who can demonstrate empathy. In that, there's a lot of things to learn in our business. If I'm taking somebody who's got a lot to learn, who maybe hasn't been doing it for 20 years, I look for somebody who will commit to the process that we have as far as training, as far as the fundamentals that have been demonstrated to work, and we'll do that consistently day in, day out. The days of hiring the person who's got the most extroverted personality, tell the best jokes, and maybe compromise a little bit on the substance and the work ethic are gone. Mm-hmm. I want somebody who understands what it takes to be successful and will commit to doing that every single day. You know what? It's tough. When I'm looking for somebody, it's not uncommon for it to take 6 months or so.
Yeah.
The best people aren't looking. Usually the people who are most successful are not feeling the pain of people who are out, combing through ads, and one of the guys who I hired was top competitor for 20 years, and he was well compensated. He had a great territory. His company felt highly of them. He won all kinds of sales records. So why would he leave? And you can't just back up a dump trunk of cash in their driveway. It took 6 months. It started with just, why don't we go have a cup of coffee and get to know each other? You never know how this industry runs. It would just be good to connect. He was aware of my company and myself. And so we started down a path of, what do you believe? Does your company believe what you believe? And I think eventually that's what convinced him to move over to our company, is that where we were going and how we wanted to take care of our stakeholders, meaning our customers, our suppliers, and our employees, was better aligned with his personal business philosophy and morals than his existing company was. So I'm not saying we underpaid him, that's for sure. But I think that fundamentally was why he moved over. But it takes a while.
Yeah, there can't be enough said for those core values lining up between the organization and the employees and having the culture fit be right. That's for sure.
And they can't just be core values you throw up on a poster. Our company has 8 core values. They're honesty, loyalty, trust, work ethic, character, passion, respect, and integrity. Starting at the very top, the owner of the company, the CEO, Ed Holland, he demonstrates those characteristics every single day. He is unwavering on his commitment to align himself personally with those core values. And I think that's where it has to start. And I think that when you have ownership and executive management that demonstrate that personally, that hire in accordance with that, and operate internally and with all 3 stakeholders in alignment with that, it becomes who you are, and there's nothing more important than reputation. And I think that probably the best thing working for Holland Company is that the reputation that the owner of the company has, and I think the company itself is very, very strong in the marketplace with customers and with suppliers. It certainly helps in trying to establish credibility with new potential partners when you've got that reputation.
Yep, good. How many hours do you sleep every night?
Probably right around 7.5.
Okay, all right.
I sleep a lot more than my wife does. I'm usually in bed by 11 and up by 6:30.
Okay, all right. Books. What's the best book you've read in the last year?
I've got 3 kids and a full-time job, so there's not a whole lot of reading that I'm doing now. You know, a lot of the books that I read are considered business self-help books. There was a guy that came out with a program called Action Selling and had a book around that. That was the last book I read, and I really enjoyed it. And I think that even if you've been doing a particular profession for a long time, sometimes when you read a book like that, it emphasizes things that you already know. But if you were to take a real honest look at yourself and your performance, you're like, I know I should be doing that, and I would like to say that I'm doing that, but not really doing that all the time. So that was a really good book, Action Selling, that I read within the last year. Probably the book that has shaped my life maybe as much as anything is a book that I read back in 1991. It's the Ben Hogan 5 Lessons, the Modern Fundamentals of Golf.
Yep.
I had this idea of taking on a new sport, golf, when I got out of undergrad, and I went out and paid $119 for a set of Wilson golf clubs from Sportmark. Somebody recommended the book, and I bought the book, and I spent thousands of hours on the range reading the book and then picking up the clubs and trying to do what Ben Hogan was demonstrating in that book. And it not only worked, I got a lot better than I was, but I totally fell in love with the game.
Yep.
You know, it's lent to a lot of great friendships that I have in the community with other golfers. It's lent to some nice business opportunities on the golf course. I've played the CEOs of major petrochemical companies and found a personal connection with them by walking the fairways of courses in Tokyo, walking the fairways of courses in Illinois and Wisconsin and a lot of other places. So
how much do you think it matters to them how well you hit a drive? You think people are legitimately impressed and they open up a little bit more to people who hit the golf ball far?
I think people are shaped by people around them that are competent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you were shanking every shot, which I've gone through rounds like that too, man. I've had some ugly rounds out there, but if you're moving a ball around the course and you're doing it in a very competent way, and as well you're creating an environment that's enjoyable and maybe sprinkling in a little business along the way where they feel like it was not only fun, but I kind of got something out of it. It fortifies relationships and it creates new opportunity. If you're not going to play well, play quickly.
That is a great piece of advice in general.
That goes to everybody. That's awesome.
Okay, how about your favorite movie?
For the last 12 years and having 3 kids, I would say that 98% of the movies that I've watched have been animated movies.
Big fan of Frozen?
It's okay to say Frozen.
I did enjoy Frozen, particularly at the end when it was the love between siblings that that made the difference. And I try to point that out as an example to my own children who were poking each other at the time. But Saving Private Ryan,
good one.
That's a good one. I love that movie. First of all, I mean, the message of leadership and message of we've got, a mission to accomplish and we're going to get it done. There's one line in that movie that I use in business, and that's Tom Hanks said to one of his officers, "You never bitch down. You only bitch up." Yeah. Right? And so when you have direct reports and things aren't going well, you don't bitch to them. In some ways, toe the company line. You give the perspective of the other person who's not in the room that they're typically complaining about, and then you make sure that when you are bitching, you're talking up to the right person and presenting it in a way where it's constructive. So I love that movie.
Yeah. All right, how about what's your favorite restaurant?
Mexican. It's our comfort food. So there's a new Mexican restaurant that opened here in Oak Brook called En Fuego. That's where we go. Kids love the Mexican food. My wife and I love not just food with some spice to it, but a nice cold margarita to wash it down. So En Fuego.
Is this one of these new fancy Mexican places where the tacos got like 10 different ingredients that are locally sourced from wherever?
Kind of, yeah. The place itself, I wouldn't say is real fancy, but I think, what they've done in terms of combining ingredients delivers much more than a Taco Bell taco. It's kind of a Rick Bayless sort of Mexican sort of food. I would say that long-standing Rick Bayless's Frontera Grill in Chicago is my favorite.
Place is great.
Oh, I love it. I love everything about it. I love the environment, and the food is great. It's creative. The drinks are really fresh and delicious. So that's my favorite one in the city.
All right. Speaking of what's your favorite drink?
It's margarita. You got to have a Rick Bayless margarita, not a something that's put together with some sweet sour syrup and some cheap tequila. I mean, tequila itself is a lot like wine. There's different varietals. There's Blanco, Reposados, and Añejos. They're rested in reposado means rested, so it's rested in oak barrels, just like wine. And añejos are in those barrels for a longer period of time, and how they rest them and the oak that they use and such develops a character of flavors that can be very different. So you infuse that with some really fresh lime juice and other ingredients that a place like Frontera Grill knows how to put together, and it's just the best. So yeah, margarita is my drink.
Nice. I thought for sure you were going to say Whistle Pig.
I do enjoy a good Whistle Pig too. It's funny how there are certain things that go through that have been around for a long time, and then all of a sudden there's this resurgence of interest, and maybe it's just local resurgence of like cigars have gone through that from time to time. Certain types of liquors have gone through that. Right now, I'm really interested in the brown liquors, in the bourbons and the whiskeys, and learning about them. I was given a bottle of Jefferson's.
Which one?
Gosh, it's sitting down in my bar right now. So Jefferson's is owned by a guy out of Kentucky, and he when he's creating the mash and ferments it in barrels, he's discovered that agitating the barrels improves the bourbon. So he puts his barrels on boats.
Yep, so that's the Jefferson's Oceans bourbon.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep, that stuff's great.
So you know it.
Oh, I know it.
So the guy who founded it, so I may have mentioned that I'm changing roles at Holland. I'm moving from the sales manager to running the polypropylene portfolio. The guy who's backfilling me into the sales manager role, his name is Ted Bonner. He's buddies with the founder.
No way.
He went to high school with him. That's so nice. He's the one who actually gave me the bottle for Christmas, and so he knows the guy personally and has got a lot of knowledge on the background and the guy personally. And he grew up in Kentucky, so he's a big fan of the brown liquor down there.
I feel like we're all going to need to take a road trip coming up here.
Oh, you know what? So Ted, his stepfather, I think I may have mentioned, his stepfather was a really renowned guy down in Louisville. It was a guy named Larry Jones. So Larry Jones, he was drafted by the Baltimore Orioles to play baseball. He ended up going to University of Kentucky and playing football for Bear Bryant. Wow. He's got a twin brother, Larry and Harry Jones, both played for Bear Bryant. Their numbers were 1A and 1B on their uniform. They're the only NCAA players to have a number and a character on their uniform. He was an All-American, University of Kentucky. He came out and he was a soldier, and he got like a Silver Star or something like that. He got some military award. I wish I could remember exactly what it is. And then he came back to Kentucky, started a plastics company called Jones Plastics. The company was wildly successful. It's over a $50 million, actually probably over an $80 million plastics processing company. Then he was one of the founding members for a country club called Valhalla Country Club.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
And is a scratch golfer. and got interested in skiing and became an expert skier. So Ted's got a ski and ski out condo in Snowmass that we're going to week after next to do some skiing. So this guy, an amazing guy. He built quite a community of friends down in Louisville, like Denny Crum is good friends with Ted's mom and Larry. They're big time into obviously the horse culture down there and horse racing. So he's got access to some amazing barns to go through tours and see the horses and stuff like that. They've got a box down there for the Kentucky Derby, like a really nice box down there. So I've never been before.
Let's go one more question. Actually, I got two more. What is something that you believe that few others do?
Something that I believe that few others do.
Yeah.
Like it's an out there thought. People would maybe think you're stupid for thinking it, but you still think it.
This is going to be a poor response, but I can't think of anything that I believe that is that far out there. Other than, I truly believe that the approach to the work in terms of sales is not about selling. It's about helping people grow their business and taking the time to try to understand what that looks like. Because with 20 different customers, it looks 20 different ways. Maybe that's a novel sort of thing to believe on the sales side, that it's not about closing the deal. The deals will close if you're helping people be successful.
You mean it's not about a funnel and loading it from the top and then moving it through stages and then all these prospecting and KPIs and all that stuff?
There's systems and processes that are important, and it's about, having good work practices and about good preparation. Like Vince Lombardi said, the only thing that's more important than winning is preparing to win. There are some really important fundamental things that you do to put yourself in position to close, to win. But really what it comes down to is not being desperate to sell something. It's being desperate or at least committed to the process of making your customers better, and then the numbers take care of themselves. That's what I believe in.
Thanks for listening to Conversations Around the Corner, produced by Wall Protects, the designer and manufacturer of wall protection products for healthcare, hospitality, or any commercial building. Be sure to subscribe in iTunes or Stitcher, and tune in next week when we will have another conversation around the corner.